Welcome to A Year of War and Peace. I'm your host, Brian E. Denton. A Year of War and Peace is a daily, year-long, chapter-by-chapter reading of and meditation on Leo Tolstoy's epic novel, War and Peace. In these videos and podcasts, you'll be treated to a free reading of one chapter per day of the novel, plus a reflective essay I've written individually tailored to that day's chapter. These readings are offered for free, though if you'd like to support me, you can do so in one of three ways. First, you could purchase my ebook, A Year of War and Peace. It features the entire novel, plus all of my reflective essays, and it's only $2.99 on Amazon.com. You could also become a patron at patreon.com/Brian E. Denton. If you sign up there, you'll receive a sonnet once a month, plus a link to an ebook of my collected sonnets. Finally, if you like, you can make a one-time donation to my PayPal account. The email there is brianedenton@gmail.com. You can also use that email to contact me. I'd be happy to hear from you. Your support is greatly appreciated.
Today's reading and reflection is from chapter 289. Chapter 289. Through the cross streets of the Kamovniki quarter, the prisoners marched, followed only by their escort in the vehicles and wagons belonging to that escort. But when they reached the supply stores, they came among a huge and closely packed train of artillery mingled with private vehicles. At the bridge they all halted, waiting for those in front to get across. From the bridge they had a view of the endless lines of moving baggage trains before and behind them. To the right, where the Kaluga road turns near Neskuchny, endless rows of troops and carts stretched away into the distance. These were troops of Belharanius's corps, which had started before any of the others. Behind, alongside the riverside and across the stone bridge, were Ney's troops in transport. Davout's troops, in whose charge were the prisoners, were crossing the Crimean bridge, and some were already debouching into the Kaluga road. But the baggage train stretched out so that the last of the Bukharani's train had yet to go out of Moscow and reach the Kaluga road when the vanguard of Ney's army was already emerging from the great Ordnyeka Street. When they had crossed the Crimean bridge, the prisoners moved a few steps forward, halted, and again moved on. And from all sides, vehicles and men crowded closer and closer together. They advanced a few hundred paces that separated the bridge from the Kaluga road, taking more than an hour to do so, and came out upon the square where the streets of the Transmovska ward and the Kaluga road converged, and the prisoners, jammed close together, had to stand for some hours at the crossway. From all sides, like the roar of the sea, were heard the rattle of wheels, the tramp of feet, and incessant shouts of anger and abuse. Pierre stood pressed against the wall of a charred house, listening to that noise which mingled in his imagination with the roll of the drums. To get a better view, several officer prisoners climbed onto the wall of the half-burned house against which Pierre was leaning. "What crowds! Just look at the crowds! They've loaded goods even on the cannon. Look there, those are furs!" they exclaimed. "Just see what the blackguards have looted. There, see what that one has behind in the cart? Why, those are the settings taken from some icons, by heaven. Ah, the rascals. See how that fellow has loaded himself up? He can hardly walk. Good Lord, they've even grabbed their chassis. See that fellow there sitting on the trunks? Heavens, they're fighting. That's right, hit him in the snout, on the snout, like this. We shan't get away before evening. Look there. Why, that must be Napoleon's own. See what horses, and the monograms with the crown? It's like a portable house. That fellow's dropped his sack and doesn't see it. Fighting again. A woman with a baby. Not bad looking either. Yes, I dare say that's the way they'll let you pass. Just look, there's no end to it. Russian wenches, by heaven, so they are. And carriages. See how comfortably they've settled themselves in? Again, as at the church in Kamovniki, a wave of general curiosity bore all the prisoners forward onto the road, and Pierre, thanks to his stature, saw over the heads of the others what so attracted their curiosity. In 3 carriages involved among the munition carts, closely squeezed together, sat women with rouged faces, dressed in glaring colors, who were shouting something in shrill voices. From the moment Pierre had recognized the appearance of the mysterious force, nothing had seemed to him strange or dreadful. Neither the corpse smeared with soot for fun, nor these women hurrying away, nor the burned ruins of Moscow. All that he now witnessed scarcely made an impression on him, as if his soul, making ready for a hard struggle, refused to receive impressions that might weaken it. The women's vehicles drove by. Behind them came more carts, soldiers, wagons, soldiers, guns, carriages, soldiers, ammunition carts, more soldiers, and now and then, women. Pierre did not see the people as individuals, but saw their movement. All these people and horses seemed driven forward by some invisible power. During the hour Pierre watched them, they all came flowing from the different streets with one and the same desire to get on quickly. They all jostled one another, began to grow angry and to fight. White teeth gleamed, brows furrowed. Ever the same words of abuse flew from side to side, and all the faces bore the same swaggeringly resolute and coldly cruel expression that had struck Pierre that morning on the corporal's face when the drums were beating. It was not till nearly evening that the officer commanding the escort collected his men and with shouts and quarrels forced his way in among the baggage trains, and the prisoners, hemmed in on all sides, emerged onto the Kaluga road. They marched very quickly, without resting, and halted only when the sun began to set. The baggage carts drew up close together, and the men began to prepare for their night's rest. They all appeared angry and dissatisfied. For a long time, oaths, angry shouts, and fighting could be heard from all sides. A carriage that followed the escort ran into one of the carts and knocked a hole in it with its pole. Several soldiers ran towards the cart from different sides. Some beat the carriage horses on their heads, turning them aside. Others fought among themselves, and Pierre saw that one German was badly wounded on the head by a sword. It seemed that all these men, now that they had stopped amid fields in the chill dusk of the autumn evening, experienced one and the same feeling of unpleasant awakening from the hurry and eagerness to push on that had seized them at the start. Once at a standstill, they all seemed to understand that they did not yet know where they were going, and that much that was painful and difficult awaited them on the journey. During this halt, the escort treated the prisoners even worse than they had done at the start. It was here that the prisoners for the first time received horseflesh for their meat ration. From the officer down to the lowest soldier, they showed what seemed like personal spite against each of the prisoners, an unexpected contrast to their former friendly relations. This spite increased still more when, on calling over the roll of prisoners, it was found that in the bustle of leaving Moscow, one Russian soldier, who had pretended to suffer from colic, had escaped. Pierre saw a Frenchman beat a Russian soldier cruelly for straying too far from the road, and heard his friend the captain reprimand and threaten to court-martial a non-commissioned officer on account of the escape of the Russian. To the non-commissioned officer's excuse that the prisoner was ill and could not walk, the officer replied that the order was to shoot those who lagged behind. Pierre felt that that fatal force which had crushed him during the executions, but which he had not felt during the imprisonment, now again controlled the existence. It was terrible, but he felt that in proportion to the efforts of that fatal force to crush him, there grew and strengthened in his soul a power of life independent of it. He ate his supper of buckwheat soup with horseflesh and chatted with his comrades. Neither Pierre nor any of the others spoke of what they had seen in Moscow, or of the roughness of their treatment by the French, or of the order to shoot them which had been announced to them. As if in reaction against the worsening of their position, they were all particularly animated and gay. They spoke of personal reminiscences, of amusing scenes they had witnessed during the campaign, and avoided all talk of their present situation. The sun had long since set. Bright stars shone out here and there in the sky. A red glow, as of a conflagration, spread above the horizon from the rising full moon, and that vast red ball swayed strangely in the gray haze. It grew light. The evening was ending, but the night had not come yet. Pierre got up and left his new companions, crossing between the campfires to the other side of the road, where he had been told the common soldiers prisoners were stationed. He wanted to talk to them. On the road he was stopped by a French sentinel who ordered him back. Pierre turned back, not to his companions by the campfire, but to an unharnessed cart where there was nobody. Tucking his legs under him and dropping his head, He sat down on the cold ground by the wheel of the cart and remained motionless a long while, sunk in thought. Suddenly, he burst out into a fit of his broad, good-natured laughter, so that men from various sides turned with surprise to see what this strange and evidently solitary laughter could mean. "Ha ha ha!" laughed Pierre, and he said aloud to himself, "The soldier did not let me pass. They took me and shut me up. They hold me captive. What? Me? My immortal soul? Ha 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 ha!" And he laughed till tears started to his eyes. A man got up and came to see what this queer big fellow was laughing at all by himself. Pierre stopped laughing, got up, went farther away from the inquisitive man, and looked around him. The huge, endless bivouac that had previously resounded with the crackling of campfires and the voices of many men had grown quiet. The red campfires were growing paler and dying down. High up in the light sky hung the full moon. Forest and fields beyond the camp, unseen before, were now visible in the distance. And farther still, beyond those forests and fields, the bright, oscillating, limitless distance lured one to itself. Pierre glanced up at the sky, and the twinkling stars in its faraway depths. And all that is me. All that is within me. And it is all I, thought Pierre. And they caught all that and put it into a shed boarded up with planks. He smiled and went and lay down to sleep beside his companions. All right, that concludes my reading of chapter 289. I will now proceed to my reflection on the same. A Year of War and Peace, day 289. The Grain of a Fig. The biblical account of Abraham and his son Isaac incites the lividity of the unbeliever and inspires the fidelity of the faithful. To the skeptic, the tale is proof positive of the unreason and barbarity of the ancient faith, while the believer sees in it a sample of pious devotion. What must Abraham have thought of his own story, though? We know that he was a man sure of his Lord. He knew, rather than merely believed, in the all-powerful nature of the deity, and he stood as God's favored and favorite. Yet this omnipotent and omniscient divinity, the author of all creation, saw fit to prepare for Abraham a life of disappointment, worry, and hardship. Famine, death, and pestilence. Abraham witnessed it all. The poor guy even had to shave the foreskin off his own cock. His greatest woe, however, was the infertility of his wife Sarah. Though he desired few things more in life than to have children, he nevertheless, despite plentiful pleas, suffered a century of childlessness. Then, the same God who finally blessed Abraham with a child likewise demanded that same child's sacrifice. What was Abraham to make of such a world? Pierre Bezukhov experiences his own Abrahamic vicissitudes in our novel. We know he was once rich but now poor. Even during his imprisonment, within this one chapter, he is witness to a disparate incident. Things start out as well as can be imagined for someone in his position. The French are relatively kind to him, and there exists a species of brotherhood among the guards and the guarded. That all changes once the march out of Moscow begins. It's a complete mess. All around Pierre erupts the hoary iniquity of men, danger, insult, violence, rapine, and strife. But he remains untouched by this sudden change of circumstance. All that he now witnessed, writes Tolstoy, hardly made any impression on him, as if his soul, making ready for a hard struggle, refused to receive impressions that might weaken it. We're not sure exactly how Pierre achieves this state of equanimity among the madness, but we're offered hints. As the chapter closes, he goes off on his own during nightfall to contemplate the skies. He takes it all in, the countryside, the distant city, the expansive starry sky, and the entire cosmos beyond. He erupts into uncontrollable laughter. All that is me, he says. All that is within me, and it is all I. It's as if seeing himself as a component of all existence makes his troubles seem irrelevant. And what complaint is there against a man who does you wrong, if you are him, and he is you? Daily meditation. Constantly contemplate the whole of time and the whole of substance, and consider that all individual things, as to substance, are a grain of fig, and as to time, the turning of a gimlet. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations. All right, so that concludes my reading and reflection on chapter 289. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for joining me. Remember that if you'd like to support me, you can do so either by purchasing the ebook, A Year of War and Peace, becoming a patron at patreon.com, or making a one-time donation at PayPal. You'll also find down in the description links to my Amazon wish list for books and movies. If you want to get me one of those, we can set up a Zoom call to talk about those books or that movie. Your support is greatly appreciated. Tomorrow, we're going to be reading and reflecting on chapter 290 of War and Peace. I hope you'll join me. Until then, take care of yourselves and others.